Jake Solis had never believed in the supernatural or anything out of the ordinary. He was a simple freelance writer, spending most of his time observing life from the comfort of his apartment, taking notes and writing about whatever caught his attention. But tonight, as the cool breeze brushed against his face while he stood on the balcony, something extraordinary happened that would change his life forever. He had just finished a long day of work, and the sky was clear, except for the strange object that appeared from nowhere, heading directly toward him. At first, Jake thought it might be a shooting star. But this object wasn't falling. It was flying, hovering in place, almost as if it were waiting for him. The metallic disc shimmered in the moonlight, reflecting a light that seemed to pulse with energy. Jake's heart raced as he took a step back, unsure whether to run or stay. But before he could make up his mind, a bright beam of light shot out from the craft, wrapping around him like a rope and lifting him off his feet. In a flash, the world below him seemed to shrink, and everything went silent. His feet left the balcony, and Jake felt weightless, his body rising higher and higher into the night sky. Panic surged within him as he tried to scream, but no sound came out. The beam pulled him up until he was inside the craft. He couldn't believe what was happening. A feeling of confusion and terror overtook him as he looked around. The interior of the spacecraft was sleek, metallic, and strangely beautiful. The walls had a soft, glowing light to them, and everything appeared to be made from materials Jake had never seen before. He tried to move, but his body felt heavy, as though he was frozen in place. That's when he saw her. Standing in front of him was an alien woman, radiating an eerie beauty that left Jake stunned. Her skin shimmered with an iridescent blue hue, and her hair was long and silver, cascading down her back like a flowing river of light. Her eyes, though, were the most striking feature, an intense shade of purple that seemed to look right through him, as if she knew his every thought. Her presence was commanding, yet she carried an air of grace, moving effortlessly in the alien surroundings. She didn't speak immediately, only watched him with an expression that was difficult to read. For a moment, Jake wondered if this was some kind of dream or hallucination. But no, the cold metal beneath his feet and the strange sensation of being suspended in a foreign environment told him that this was real. Who are you?" Jake managed to stammer, his voice shaking. The alien woman's lips curled into a faint smile. She took a step closer, her presence both calming and unsettling at the same time. "I am Arlaza," she said, her voice soft but firm, with an alien rhythm to her words. "I come from a distant galaxy, and you, Jake Solis, have been chosen." Jake's mind raced as he processed the words. Chosen for what? Why him? His heart pounded in his chest as he tried to make sense of the situation. Chosen for what? He asked, his voice barely above a whisper. He wanted answers. No, he needed them. But Arlaza's smile didn't fade. Instead, she stepped back slightly, observing him as though she were trying to gauge his reaction to the revelation. "You, Jake," she began, "hold something unique, something valuable that my people have long sought." Jake's confusion deepened, but before he could question her further, she held up her hand, signaling him to remain quiet. "I know you have many questions," she said, her voice softening slightly. "But the truth is, humanity possesses a trait that my kind has lost, a trait that can save us all. And I need your help." Jake stood frozen, still trying to wrap his mind around what was happening. He had always thought of aliens as little more than a myth, stories told to scare children. But this was real. And whatever Arlaza was about to ask him, it was something that would change everything. Jake stood there, utterly speechless, as the alien woman, Arlaza, explained the reason he had been chosen. He had always imagined alien encounters to be something like the movies, hostile creatures, bright lights, and a swift escape. But this was different. Arlaza didn't seem like a threat. In fact, she seemed almost human in a way. But the more she spoke, the more Jake realized how out of his depth he was. "You hold something special, Jake," she continued, her voice calm yet filled with a weight of urgency. "Your kind, humans, possess an ability that is unmatched across the galaxies. A deep well of empathy, creativity, and resilience. My people, the Zalrith, have lost these traits over time, and we are on the brink of extinction because of it." Jake's head was spinning. He could barely comprehend what Arlaza was saying. He had heard stories about how humanity was unique, how humans could adapt, fight back, and survive against all odds. But to hear an alien actually say that they needed something from humans, it was beyond belief. "You're saying that we can save you?" Jake asked, still trying to wrap his mind around the situation. Arlaza nodded slowly, her silver hair catching the light as she moved. "Yes, my people's survival depends on your emotional strength. We need it. Without it, we are doomed. Our civilization is dying, and only the humanity you possess can help us." Jake's heart began to race. This was far from anything he could have ever imagined. He looked around the interior of the spacecraft, trying to ground himself in the unfamiliar surroundings. The smooth, metallic walls seemed to hum with energy, and the soft glow of the lighting gave the place an almost dreamlike quality. But all he could focus on now was Arlaza, and the way she spoke about humanity, as if it were a precious resource, something to be harvested. "But why me?" Jake asked, his voice faltering slightly. "Why did you come for me? Surely there are other humans you could have chosen." Arlaza's eyes locked onto his, her purple gaze intense. "It is not just any human we need, Jake. It is you. Your mind, your spirit. You see, the Zalrith have tried to revive our race by replicating human emotions artificially, but it never works. It's always hollow, empty. We have the technology, but we lack what you have, the heart to create, to feel deeply. That is why I came to Earth, to find someone who could unlock what we have lost." Jake could hardly believe what he was hearing. He was just an ordinary guy, nothing special. He didn't think he had anything that an entire alien race would need. And yet, here he was, pulled from his apartment and taken aboard a spacecraft by a beautiful alien who claimed he had the power to save her dying civilization. "How do I help?" Jake finally asked, his voice shaky but determined. If this was real, and if Arlaza truly believed what she was saying, then he had to know what was at stake. Arlaza's expression softened, but there was a hint of sadness in her eyes. "We need you to undergo a process, a transfer of your emotional energy, your creativity, your resilience. It's not something that can be easily explained, but once it is done, we can begin to heal. My people can start to feel again. We can rebuild what we have lost." Jake's mind raced. Could he really do this? Could he give up something so vital to him in order to help an alien species? The weight of the decision was almost too much to bear. But then, in the quiet stillness of the alien craft, a strange feeling began to form inside him. It wasn't fear. It was something else, a sense of purpose, of responsibility. He had always wanted to make a difference in the world, to have an impact. But he never imagined it would come in the form of saving an entire alien race. It was overwhelming. But he felt as though this was the only choice. "I'll help you," Jake said, surprising himself with his own words. Arlaza's eyes softened even further, and for the first time, Jake saw a glimmer of hope in her gaze. "Thank you, Jake," she said, her voice filled with gratitude. "You may not understand yet, but you will. We are on the edge of something incredible. Together, we can save my people." And with that, Jake's life changed forever. What started as a typical evening on his balcony had now become the beginning of an intergalactic journey that would alter the course of humanity's place in the universe. But little did Jake know, the true challenge was only just beginning. Jake's head was still spinning as Arlaza explained the significance of what she had just told him. He had been chosen, not by accident, but because humanity possessed something unique, something that, according to her, could save the entire Zalrith species from extinction. The realization hit him like a wave. He had never seen himself as anything special, just an ordinary guy trying to make a living as a freelance writer. But now, he was caught in something far greater than anything he could have ever imagined. The weight of Arlaza's words was heavy, and it felt as though the fate of an entire civilization rested in his hands. Humans have something precious, Arlaza continued, her purple eyes locking onto Jake's. Your empathy, your creativity, your resilience. These are the qualities that have kept your species alive through countless challenges. My people, the Zalrith, once shared these traits, but over millennia, we've lost them. We've become cold, calculated, and devoid of the deep emotions that once defined us. Jake couldn't help but feel a mixture of awe and disbelief. The thought that something as intangible as emotions, things that many humans took for granted, could be so valuable to another species was mind-boggling. He had heard stories about how humans were resilient, how they could face hardship and still keep going, but he never thought it would have any real meaning outside of Earth. But how can I help? Jake asked, his voice a mix of curiosity and caution. He had so many questions, and each answer led to more confusion. You want me to somehow give you what makes humans human? Arlaza nodded, her expression serious. Yes, we have the technology to extract and amplify the traits we need, but it's never worked. The process is incomplete. We cannot replicate the depth of human emotion, the true spark that fuels your creativity and resilience. But if we could somehow transfer that essence, if we could connect with it directly, we might be able to restore what we've lost. Jake's mind raced. Could he really do something like that? Could he give up something so deeply tied to who he was, and not just for himself, but for an entire species? The idea seemed impossible, yet Arlaza's conviction was undeniable. She seemed so certain that he held the key to saving her people, and that certainty made Jake hesitate. He was a writer, a storyteller. He spent his days capturing the emotional experiences of others through words. But this was something far beyond anything he had ever encountered. This was real. He looked around the ship, trying to ground himself. The sleek, metallic walls, the low hum of the engine, the soft, pulsating lights. It all felt like a dream. But it wasn't. This was happening. He was standing in an alien craft, talking to a woman from a distant galaxy, and he was being asked to sacrifice something that made him who he was. Is there a way to reverse it? Jake asked, the question slipping out before he could stop himself. If I give you what you need, can I get it back? Or will I be changed forever? Arlaza's expression softened, and for a moment, Jake could have sworn he saw a flicker of regret in her eyes. That, I cannot promise. The process we would use is unpredictable. It could change you in ways that we do not fully understand. But without it, my people will not survive. If we fail, we will all be lost. The gravity of her words settled in Jake's chest. The future of an entire species rested on his shoulders, and yet the cost was unknown. He would be giving up a part of himself, something that could never truly be returned. His empathy, his creativity, the very things that made him feel alive, would they be gone forever? Could he still be the same person after this? You're asking me to take a leap of faith, Jake said quietly, looking at Arlaza. She nodded, her eyes filled with something that resembled hope, but also a hint of fear. It was clear she wasn't certain of what would happen either. But it was equally clear that she believed there was no other choice. I am, Jake, Arlaza said softly. I know it is a lot to ask, but without this, we have no future. Please, trust me. Jake's mind was still a whirlpool of doubts, but as he stood there, looking at Arlaza, something inside him began to shift. Maybe this was his chance to do something that truly mattered. Maybe, just maybe, this was his moment to make a difference, not just for himself, but for the entire galaxy. The stakes were high, the risks were enormous, But one thing was clear. There was no turning back now. He took a deep breath, gathering his courage. "All right, I'll help you. I don't know how this will turn out, but if it means saving your people, then I'll do it." Arla's eyes softened with gratitude, and for the first time, Jake saw a glimpse of something deeper behind her alien features, genuine relief. "Thank you, Jake," she said quietly. "Together, we can save my people." Jake sat quietly in the alien spacecraft, his thoughts racing. The decision was made. He had agreed to help Arla, to give a part of himself, his emotions, his creativity, his humanity, in hopes of saving her species. But now, the reality of what he had signed up for was starting to sink in. What would this process do to him? How would it change him? And would he ever be the same again? Arla had explained the procedure briefly, but Jake wasn't sure if he was ready for what was to come. He had always prided himself on his ability to understand emotions, to write about the human experience in ways that connected with others. But this was beyond anything he could comprehend. The Zalrith, the alien race Arla came from, had lost their capacity for deep emotions over time. They had turned cold and calculated, relying on logic and technology to guide them. Now they needed what Jake and every human took for granted, the raw, messy, unpredictable emotions that made them who they were. Arla walked over to a nearby console, her long silver hair flowing behind her like a ribbon of light. She pressed a few buttons, and the room's soft glow brightened. A small pod opened in the center of the room, and inside it was a strange, humming device that seemed both ancient and futuristic at the same time. Jake swallowed hard, his nerves growing with each passing second. This was it. The moment had arrived. "Jake, you need to understand that this is a delicate process," Arla said, her voice calm but with a hint of urgency. "Once you begin, there is no going back. The transfer will start small, but we must amplify it gradually. The device will connect with your mind and body, extracting your emotional energy. It's not painful, but it can be overwhelming. You'll need to remain calm, focused." Jake looked at the device with trepidation. The thought of it connecting to his mind, taking something so personal, something so deeply tied to who he was, it felt unnatural. But he couldn't back out now. He had made a promise, and there was no turning back. He had to trust Arla, despite the uncertainty that gnawed at him. He had to believe that whatever this process did, it would be for the greater good. "Are you ready?" Arla asked, her eyes locking with his. Her gaze was steady, and Jake could see the flicker of hope in them. This was her last chance, and she was relying on him. For the first time, Jake noticed the weight of the responsibility on her shoulders. It wasn't just about saving her people, it was about the future of an entire species. And somehow, despite everything, Jake felt the gravity of that future pressing down on him. "I'm ready," Jake said, though his voice sounded shakier than he intended. Arla nodded, a look of relief crossing her face. She gestured toward the pod, indicating that he should step closer. Taking a deep breath, Jake approached the device. It hummed softly, like a distant whisper, and Jake could feel the hairs on the back of his neck stand on end. "Lie down inside," Arla instructed, her voice soft. "The process will be more effective if you are relaxed." Jake nodded, trying to push aside the growing unease in his chest. He lay down inside the pod, the cool surface beneath him sending a chill through his body. The device's smooth, metallic arms extended and gently surrounded him, adjusting to his form. A soft pulse of energy flowed from the pod, and Jake felt a strange tingling sensation in his mind. It wasn't painful, but it was odd. His thoughts seemed to shift slightly, as though something were probing the deepest parts of his consciousness. "This will only take a moment," Arla said, her voice barely a whisper as she watched from a distance. "Remember to stay calm. Focus on the emotions you wish to share. The more pure they are, the stronger the connection will be." Jake closed his eyes, trying to center himself. His mind flashed to the times he had written, Those moments of intense creativity when everything flowed effortlessly. He remembered the joy of capturing human emotion through words, the satisfaction of making people laugh, cry, or think deeply. He thought of his family, his friends, and the love he had felt in his life. He focused on those pure, genuine feelings, emotions that were so intrinsically human. As the device activated, Jake's breath caught. A sudden rush of warmth flooded through his body, and his mind seemed to open up in ways he hadn't experienced before. It wasn't just the transfer of energy. It was as though his emotions were being laid bare, exposed to an alien race that had long since forgotten how to feel. The weight of the connection was overwhelming, and Jake had to fight to keep himself grounded. Arliza stood quietly, her eyes closed in concentration as the device hummed with life. Jake's emotions were being amplified and absorbed by the Zalrith technology. He could feel himself giving a part of his soul, a part of his essence. The sensation was overwhelming. Jake could feel his emotions being pulled from him, like threads of light slowly unraveling from deep within. It wasn't painful, but it was strange, as though his very essence was being examined, scrutinized, and then siphoned away. He felt lighter, somehow, but at the same time, he also felt exposed. His memories, his experiences, his joys and sorrows, all of it seemed to be flowing out of him, into the device that surrounded him. The machine hummed softly, the pulsating light growing stronger with each passing second. Despite the strangeness of it all, Jake's mind remained sharp. He focused on the emotions he had gathered throughout his life, the feelings that made him human. He thought about his childhood, the excitement of Christmas mornings, the love he felt for his parents, and the way his heart raced when he had first fallen in love. He thought about his passion for writing, the way words had always come naturally to him, and how he had always used them to connect with others. And then he thought about the pain of loss, of heartbreak, and of the mistakes he had made along the way. He poured it all into the transfer, offering everything he could to the alien technology that was collecting his soul. The room around him began to shimmer with a strange, otherworldly light. It wasn't harsh or blinding, but it was intense, as though the very air itself was charged with energy. Jake could feel his heartbeat quicken as the emotions flowed from him into the machine. He felt vulnerable, as though there was nothing left of him but raw, exposed feelings. It was terrifying, but exhilarating at the same time. He had never felt so alive. And yet, in the back of his mind, a question lingered. What would this do to him? Would he be a different person after this? Could he return to the life he had known, the world he had left behind? Or would he be irrevocably changed, forever altered by this connection with the Zalrith? As the transfer continued, Jake's thoughts became hazy. It was as though his mind was becoming a blur of emotions and memories, a swirling mix of everything that made him who he was. He could no longer tell where his emotions ended and the machine's influence began. All he knew was that the energy, the warmth, the love, the pain, was pouring into the device at an increasing rate. And in that moment, it felt like everything he had ever experienced, every emotion he had ever felt, was being condensed into one singular purpose: to save the Zalrith. The device around him began to hum louder, and Jake felt a strange sense of urgency in the air. He could feel the energy surging, almost as if it were reaching its peak. The soft glow of the room grew brighter, casting an eerie light across his face. The emotions, his emotions, were being amplified, stretched to their limits, and the machine seemed to be feeding on it, extracting more and more. Jake's chest tightened, and for a moment, he feared he might lose himself in the process. But then, just as quickly, the sensation began to ebb. The transfer slowed, and the machine's hum softened to a gentle purr. Jake's breath came in shallow gasps, and he blinked several times, trying to adjust to the sudden silence that had descended upon the room. The light in the room dimmed, and the device slowly retracted, its work seemingly complete. Jake felt a deep sense of exhaustion wash over him. It was as though every part of him had been drained, like he had given all that he could. He wanted to lie down to rest, but something inside him urged him to stay focused. Arlaza stepped forward, her face filled with both awe and concern. Her purple eyes locked onto Jake, searching for any signs of distress. She reached out a hand, her fingers hovering just above his shoulder. "Jake, are you all right?" she asked, her voice soft but filled with genuine worry. Jake's throat felt dry, and for a moment, he couldn't find the words. He felt different. It was hard to explain, but there was a sense of emptiness inside him, a hollowness where his emotions had once been. It wasn't that he couldn't feel anything at all. It was more like a part of him had been stripped away. His mind raced, trying to grasp what had just happened, but the reality of it all was overwhelming. I don't know," Jake finally managed to say. But Arlaza didn't look at him with guilt or regret. Instead, there was a glimmer of hope in her eyes. "You did it, Jake," she said softly. "The transfer was successful. We have what we need. My people, we can finally feel again." Jake's heart raced as the words sank in. The Zalrith would be able to feel again. They could rebuild their society, restore the emotions that had been lost for so long. And it was all because of him. He had given everything he had, and for a brief moment, he felt a sense of pride. But that sense of accomplishment quickly gave way to a gnawing feeling of emptiness. Had he given up too much? Jake stared at his hands, the faintest tremor running through his fingers. He felt like a part of him had been taken away, something intangible but deeply important. He had given his emotions, his creativity, and everything that had made him human. The energy from the device still pulsed in his mind, echoing in the back of his thoughts. But something was missing. He couldn't quite explain it, but the weight of what he had done seemed heavier with every passing moment. He had helped the Zalrith, given them a chance to reclaim what they had lost, but now he wasn't sure if he could ever truly feel the same again. Arlaza stood by the console, her eyes scanning the data that flickered across the screen. The corner of her mouth curled into a smile as she read the results. Jake could see her joy, the hope in her expression. For a brief moment, the fear and uncertainty that had plagued her face earlier were gone, replaced by a glimmer of optimism. She had what she needed. The Zalrith were going to change, to rediscover their emotions, to feel once more. "Jake," Arlaza said softly, her voice breaking through his thoughts. She approached him, her steps light but purposeful. "You've done more than just give us your emotions. You've given us a chance to rebuild ourselves. My people, our people, will never forget what you've done." Jake wanted to respond, wanted to tell her that he wasn't sure if he had done the right thing, but the words wouldn't come. He opened his mouth, but no sound emerged. He could only nod, a hollow feeling filling his chest. He felt proud of what he had helped accomplish, but also empty, as if he had sacrificed too much of himself for it to ever feel truly worth it. "How do you feel, Jake?" Arlaza asked, her voice filled with concern. "I know this has been difficult, and I can't imagine what it's like to give so much of yourself. But the transfer was successful, and we've already begun analyzing the data. We can bring back the emotions that we lost." Jake swallowed hard, trying to push past the lump in his throat. I'm not sure," he admitted, finally managing to speak. "I feel different, empty in a way, like something inside me is missing. But I don't know what. You said it was supposed to be a gradual process, right? I thought I'd feel better by now." Arlaza's expression softened, and she reached out a hand, gently touching his arm. "It's normal to feel disoriented. You've given up something that's a core part of who you are. But this is just the beginning, Jake. It will take time, for both you and for us. We may have your emotions, but it's going to take effort to restore what we've lost." Jake looked up at her, seeing the sincerity in her eyes. It was clear that she didn't fully understand the depth of what he had given up, but she was trying. He appreciated her empathy, even if it didn't make the emptiness inside him go away. He had helped her people, given them the chance to feel again, but at what cost? Will it be enough? Jake asked, his voice barely above a whisper. Will you be able to truly feel again? Will you be human? Arliza's brow furrowed slightly, her purple eyes reflecting the uncertainty that lingered beneath her calm exterior. We may never be exactly like you, Jake. We are Zalrith, and we will always be different in some ways. But your emotions, what we've gained from you, will help us reconnect with the parts of ourselves that we've lost. It will take time, but we believe we can rebuild. Jake took a deep breath and let it out slowly, trying to steady his racing thoughts. He wanted to believe in her words, to believe that his sacrifice wasn't in vain. But the emptiness inside him was overwhelming, and for a moment, he wondered if he would ever feel whole again. Would the emotions he had given be replaced, or would he be forever changed, a shell of the person he had been before? Thank you, Arliza said, her voice gentle yet full of gratitude. We couldn't have done this without you. I can never fully repay you for what you've given us, but I will make sure that the Zalrith remember your sacrifice. Jake nodded, his throat tight. I hope it was worth it, he muttered, more to himself than to her. Arliza seemed to understand, her gaze softening even further. She could see the toll this had taken on him, and though she was grateful, she could not deny the weight of the situation. Jake had given everything, and in return, the Zalrith would rebuild, but at a cost. She would make sure that their people never forgot the human who had saved them, and in that moment, she promised herself that she would find a way to help Jake heal, too. The silence that followed was heavy, each of them lost in their own thoughts. Jake stared at the stars outside the window, the vastness of space stretching out before him. He had made a choice, and now Jake sat in the quiet of the ship's control room, staring out the large window at the stars that stretched out before him. The journey ahead was still uncertain, but there was no turning back now. The Zalrith had what they needed. His emotions, his creativity, his essence, he had given them all to save their species. It was a strange thought, knowing that he had helped bring back something so fundamental to an entire race, but the price of that help weighed heavily on him. He hadn't felt like himself since the transfer. The emptiness inside him had grown, a hollow ache in his chest that he couldn't ignore. His thoughts felt distant, as though he were looking through a fog, unable to grasp anything with the clarity he once had. He tried to write, something he had always done to make sense of his thoughts, but the words wouldn't come. The emotions he had always poured into his work were gone. Without them, he was lost. Arliza entered the room, her presence soft but unmistakable. She had been giving Jake space, respecting his need for time to process the enormity of what had happened. But now, as the ship moved further from Earth, she knew that the time had come for them to talk. Jake, Arliza said gently, stepping closer. She studied his face, her purple eyes filled with concern. How are you feeling? Jake turned toward her, managing a tired smile. I'm not sure, he replied honestly. I've never felt this empty before. It's like I gave away a part of myself that I can never get back. I thought I'd be okay, that I could handle it, but now I'm not so sure. Arliza's expression softened, and she knelt beside him, placing a hand on his shoulder. I know this is hard, she said, her voice quiet but full of empathy. What you've done is beyond anything I could have imagined. You gave us something so precious, something that has been lost for generations. It was never meant to be easy. Jake nodded, appreciating her words, but they didn't ease the weight inside him. I helped you. I know I did. But it feels like I've lost something important in the process, and it's not just my creativity. It's everything. My connection to the world, to the people around me. I don't know how to explain it. Arliza didn't speak at first, allowing Jake the space to express his thoughts. She understood that his sacrifice was not just about emotions, but about his entire identity. He had given up something fundamental, and the effect it had on him was deeper than she had anticipated. The emotions we've taken from you, she began carefully, they won't disappear. They're part of us now, but that doesn't mean you've lost them forever. In time, the connection will fade, and you'll find new ways to create, to feel. You won't be the same as before, but you'll be something new, something stronger. Jake glanced at her, considering her words. I don't know if I can ever feel the same way again. Before, everything was so clear. I could write, I could experience things, and it felt real. But now, I don't even know if I know who I am anymore. Arlaza took a deep breath, choosing her words carefully. It's normal to feel this way after such a profound change. But you're not alone, Jake. You have us. My people are grateful, and will help you heal. It won't happen overnight, but together, we can rebuild. Jake looked out the window again, his thoughts swirling. He wasn't sure what the future held, or if he would ever be able to regain what he had given away. But Arlaza's words comforted him in a way he didn't expect. She was right. He wasn't alone. And even though everything felt uncertain, there was a glimmer of hope. Maybe, just maybe, he could rebuild himself too. It wouldn't be easy, and it wouldn't be quick, but he had given a part of himself for a reason. We'll find a way, Jake said quietly, more to himself than to Arlaza. We have to. Arlaza nodded, her eyes full of resolve. We will, Jake. And in the meantime, we'll help you find your way back. The silence between them was comfortable, filled with unspoken understanding. As Jake sat there, looking out at the stars, he realized that maybe this wasn't the end of who he was. Maybe it was the beginning of something else. A journey of self-discovery, of healing. And as the ship glided through the vastness of space, Jake couldn't help but wonder what kind of person he would become after this. What kind of life would await him when they returned to Earth? The journey to the Zalrith homeworld felt longer than it should have. Every day, the stars outside the ship's window seemed to blur into one unchanging streak of light. Jake couldn't escape the quiet in his mind, the emptiness that clung to him despite Arlaza's attempts to comfort him. She had been patient, understanding even, but the weight of what he had given up still gnawed at him. He had helped the Zalrith, yes, but in doing so, he had lost something vital, something that no amount of words or gestures could replace. He sat in the ship's lounge, watching the holographic display of the planets outside the ship. It was a beautiful sight, the colors of the stars and distant worlds blending together in a serene dance. But it didn't bring him peace. He had always felt connected to the world through his emotions, his creativity, his writing, the very way he experienced life. But now that connection was a dim memory. He couldn't write anymore, couldn't even recall what it felt like to lose himself in a story. It was as if a part of him had been erased, and no matter how much time passed, it didn't feel like it would come back. Jake. Arlaza's voice broke through his thoughts, soft and gentle. She stood in the doorway, her purple eyes watching him with a mix of curiosity and concern. We're nearing our destination. The Zalrith homeworld is just ahead. Jake nodded without looking up. He had known that the journey would eventually come to an end, but he wasn't sure if he was ready for it. What would he find on the Zalrith homeworld? Would it bring him the peace he was looking for, or would it only remind him of what he had sacrificed? Arlaza stepped closer, sitting down beside him. I know it's hard, she said, her voice steady but filled with empathy. But I want you to know that this isn't the end. It's just the beginning of a new chapter. For both of us. We've accomplished something incredible, and we'll rebuild. We'll find a way for you to feel again, to regain what you've lost. Jake met her gaze, her words offering a small flicker of hope. I don't know if that's possible, he replied quietly. It feels like I've lost a part of myself that I can never get back. Arlaza's face softened with understanding. I can't promise that it will be easy, but I can promise you this. You will never be alone in this. The Zalrith will work with you, not just to restore what's been taken, but to find new ways to create, to feel. There's more to life than what you've known, Jake. There's a whole new world waiting for you. Her words lingered in the air, and for the first time in weeks, Jake felt a spark of something he hadn't felt in a long time. Hope. He didn't know if he would ever fully recover from the emptiness he felt, but perhaps there was a chance to build something new, something different. He had helped the Zalrith because he believed in their potential, in the possibility of a better future for them. Maybe, just maybe, that same belief could help him rebuild his own life. As the ship entered the atmosphere of the Zalrith homeworld, the view outside the window shifted. The stars were replaced by the vibrant blues and greens of the planet below, its surface dotted with cities and lush landscapes. It was a world on the edge of rebirth, a world full of promise. Jake's breath caught in his throat as he gazed down at it, feeling a connection to the planet even though he didn't fully understand why. "This is where it all begins," Arlaza said, her voice tinged with awe. "The future of the Zalrith and of your world are linked now. You've done something that will echo through generations." Jake turned to look at her, the weight of her words settling over him. He had given his emotions, his essence, and in return, he had helped bring hope to an entire species. It was a heavy burden to bear, but it was also something to be proud of. Maybe the path ahead wouldn't be easy, but it would be worth it. "Thank you," Jake said quietly, his voice thick with emotion. "I never thought I'd be a part of something like this. I thought I was just a man, you know. But now, I see that everything I've been through has led me here. To you. To this world." Arlaza smiled, her eyes warm with understanding. "And you've made it possible. Now we can build something new, together." As the ship descended into the Zalrith capital, Jake felt a sense of anticipation building within him. The unknown future stretched before him, a new chapter in his life waiting to be written. It wouldn't be easy, but he wasn't alone anymore. He had Arlaza and the Zalrith by his side. And together, they would forge a new beginning, not just for their people, but for him as well. The journey wasn't over. It was only just beginning. And for the first time in a long time, Jake felt a flicker of something he thought he had lost forever. Hope. As the ship finally touched down on the Zalrith homeworld, Jake's heart raced in his chest. The moment he had both dreaded and anticipated was here. Outside the large windows, he saw a vibrant green landscape stretching far into the horizon. Massive, towering structures made of a shimmering metal rose from the ground, reflecting the sunlight that bathed the planet. The air was thick with the scent of unfamiliar flowers, the land alive with energy. It was a world full of promise, a world that was just beginning to heal, just like him. Arlaza stood beside him, her eyes full of pride as she watched the planet below. "Welcome to Zalrith," she said softly, her voice full of awe. "This is where everything begins. We rebuild, we restore, and we make sure that the sacrifices made here today are never forgotten." Jake nodded, taking in the view. It was beautiful, but it still felt distant to him. The connection he once had to his own world, to his past life, was slipping further away with each passing moment. He had done something monumental, something that would change the course of history for the Zalrith. But in doing so, he had given up something that no words could fully describe. He wasn't the same man who had left Earth behind all those weeks ago. He wasn't sure if he ever could be. Arlaza seemed to sense his thoughts, her voice quiet as she spoke. "I know this isn't easy, Jake. The changes you've gone through, they're more than just physical. You've given up a part of yourself, and I can only imagine how hard that must be." Jake looked at her, her eyes full of compassion. He had grown fond of her, of the strength she carried, her determination to rebuild her people. But even with her support, he still felt like a stranger to himself. He had helped her people, given them the chance to feel again. But now, he wasn't sure who he was without the emotions he had lost. "I don't know if I'll ever feel like I used to," Jake admitted, his voice thick with frustration. "I've lost so much, Arlaza. I helped you, I helped the Zalrith, but it feels like I've given up my identity in the process." Arlaza placed a hand on his shoulder, offering a reassuring touch. "You haven't lost yourself, Jake. You've changed, yes, but change doesn't mean loss. It means growth. and you have so much to offer still. The Zalrith will help you find your way. Together, we will find a new path for you. You're not alone in this." Jake looked at her, her words sinking in. Maybe he couldn't go back to who he was, but that didn't mean he had nothing to look forward to. The Zalrith were a people on the brink of rediscovery, and they needed him just as he needed them. He had given them his emotions, but in return, they had given him something he hadn't expected: the opportunity to rebuild, to start anew. As they stepped off the ship, Jake felt the weight of the ground beneath his feet. The planet was alive with sounds and colors. The people of Zalrith moving with purpose as they went about their daily lives. There was a sense of renewal in the air, a feeling that anything was possible. The future was uncertain, but for the first time since he had made his sacrifice, Jake felt a flicker of something deep within him: hope. Arlaza guided him through the bustling city, her presence a steady comfort. As they passed by groups of Zalrith, Jake could see the difference in their eyes. The way they looked at the world now, with more depth, more emotion. The transfer he had undergone had worked. The Zalrith were slowly regaining their feelings, and with them, their humanity. It wasn't perfect yet, but it was a start. And in the end, that's all they needed. "Do you see it, Jake?" Arlaza asked, her voice full of excitement. "The change is happening. It's slow, but it's real. My people are coming back to life." Jake watched as a group of Zalrith children laughed and played in the streets, their faces filled with joy. It was a simple sight, but to him, it meant everything. He had given them the chance to feel again, to reconnect with something they had lost for so long. And now they were building a future, not just for themselves, but for him too. "Maybe I can still find my place in this world," Jake said quietly, the words almost foreign on his tongue. But there was truth in them. He had made a difference, and he was part of something bigger than himself now. Arlaza smiled, her eyes gleaming with pride. "You will, Jake. We'll make sure of that." As they walked through the streets of Zalrith, Jake couldn't help but feel that, despite all he had lost, he had gained something just as valuable: a new purpose. The road ahead would be difficult, but with Arlaza and the Zalrith by his side, he knew that they would rebuild together, forging a future that none of them could have imagined alone. And for the first time in a long time, Jake felt like he was home.